What's up, what's up? We have the meta snapshot for patch 14.8, and there is already a B patch, so I guess it's 14.8B. They hotfixed Gnar, they hotfixed Kai'Sa, and they affected Fortune a little bit too. From my patch preview, I always said Teemo was OP at 1 and 2 star, they nerfed that as well. Not really as a comp, but as a stabilizer. Better stabilizer than Cornstarch, I would say. And then Ornn got touched a little bit, and then Aurelia buff. Aurelia comps are pretty strong right now. They're nerfing Xayah, that's related to Kai'Sa. But because all this happened a couple hours ago, we're going to do a preliminary meta snapshot right now on what all the best comps are going to be. But we're also going to be updating this every single day as new things come up on bunnymuffins.lol/meta, where you can find all the comps listed out as we'll go over in this video, along with like extra notes that might not be said explicitly in this video. But let's just get right into it. Right now, Kayn Lee Sin probably is going to be the best comp. It was already very solid before the B patch, and then since everything else is getting nerfed, it's probably going to be the best comp. After that, fast 9ing, there are a lot of Aurelia comps. When we check the data right now, Aurelia is actually towards the bottom, but I've been seeing a lot of the good players play her a bunch, so I think she might become a bit meta. Sometimes things take a little while to catch on. Data is a bit deceptive sometimes, but going into the rest of the comps, we have built different. Shen and Senna still very solid. Dryad Reroll, surprisingly, if we look at 2 costs and then 3-star average placement, they're still the best ones available on the new patch. Still pretty solid, but definitely not as OP as they were before. Let's look at the changes for Gnar quickly. So passive AD per stack 4 to 2.5%. Passive max stacks 25 to 40. So it's still a buff because he used to be 50 stacks, scaling at 2%. So they're just making him take longer to stack up, but it's still a buff from the original Gnar changes. It's just a nerf from the most recent one. So going back into the list, we have Lux Reroll, Aphelios Reroll, both still solid. Kai'Sa Bruiser still very good. If we think about Kai'Sa right now, he's at about a 4.5, 1.54 play rate. That's going to be a nerf from before where she was a 4.23 2 play rate. But if you compare her to patch 14.7b, which she was very strong in, very popular on, she was a 4.48 and 1.86. So compared to the previous patch where she was already good before she got even better, it's pretty comparable. It's a bit worse, I will say, but it's nothing to scoff at because she was pretty much the only playable 4-cost before. Yone Reroll gonna be after that. Janna Zyra Reroll, still a solid comp, didn't really get touched through any of this. Inkshadow Kai'Sa, if you have a +1 Inkshadow, it's really good. Ethereal Blade Shen, if you get this augment and you have any parts of Rage Blades, definitely hard force this, it's very, very powerful. Storyweaver Bard, solid, same with the Rage Blades. Arcanist Warden, okay-ish comp. Kobuko Lucky Claws. If I have a lot of Kobukos or if I need the econ from the Kobukos and I have tank items to put on in an early game, he's going to be very powerful. Lillia Invoker. I thought Lillia was actually going to be better, but she is a bit down in the data right now. Of course, this isn't like the biggest sample size because the patch came out just a couple hours ago, but I mean, clearly it's Kayn Lee Sin all the way. You don't need data to know that though, because they were already very good before, and they didn't get nerfed, so two things can be right at the same time. Syndra Fated gonna be after that. Kog'Maw Reroll, still okay. Zoe Soraka Diana Reroll, a good backup to like Janna Zyra. Ghostly 4-cost, still a solid comp in the mid game. You could use it to fast 9 really easily, so you could play a lot of the comps you see here and then pivot into something else in the late game. That's going to be happening a lot, I bet. I think fast 9ing is going to be the way to go on this patch. There are other Bard builds such as Mythic Bard, Umbral Yone, Alune Invoker Reroll, Duelist Reroll. Duelists, they're a lot weaker right now. Volibear's averaging a 4.68 as a 3-star. Yeah, that's pretty embarrassing, right? Before, what was Volibear? 3.82. Is it even worth 3-starring with Volibear? Probably not. For the other comps, we have also like Kha'Zix Reroll, Storyweaver Reroll. Actually, maybe we drop Duelist down to B tier right now. I mean, like the Titan's Resolve nerf was like so bad, and that was like the main item in the comp. But let's go over how to play each and every one of these. Let's start off with Kayn Lee Sin. This comp wasn't really played before the most recent patch, but since they buffed a lot of the 4-cost, guess what this comp revolves around? 4-cost, Lee Sin, Kayn, and Morgana. Morgana, one of the greatest support units because she's a great Morello applier. She also slows the enemy attack speed. The targeting's a bit random, so that is a little annoying, so you could fight RNG your way into some things. But Lee Sin and Kayn, AD Bruiser items gonna be great on them. Almost any combination. We see a bunch of like their decent items over here. It's really just like some healing item. Edge and Knight's both really good. Giant Slayer, Starax. Even the Titans after the nerf still solid. And then maybe some of the emblems if you have them. After that, throw in a bunch of heavenlies, call it a day. You have also get Sage from Morgana and Wukong, which is a nice added bonus. For augments, it's going to play very similarly to Yone Heavenly. You want support items through like Accomplice, you want Heavenly Spat. Some item augments are pretty good, such as Edge of Night. Unified's decent. Anything that gives stats, like you could even go for like the Fine Vintage, get some support items for your team because it's just really strong in this comp. But for full instructions, go on over to the website bunnymuffins.lol/meta. We have like the whole how to play section, more item recommendations, and like some extra information there too. Next comp up we have is Fast Nining. So Fast Nining, you have to play a bit flexibly. You have to know which units use which items in the late game, but luckily a lot of them share a lot of the same items. So if we look at this, a bunch of tank items or mana items can be put on Lissandra. Obviously mana items are going to be the best. Adaptive's really good. Blue buff, Spear of Shojin. Protector's Vow is really good on her. She's just going to be able to farm a bunch of items if you ever get her early. Rakan can use any sorts of stuff, either AP or tank. Set uses AD or tank, preferably AD in the Fast 9 build. Azir, any sort of like mana regeneration item, AP items work. He's going to be sharing items with Hui. Wukong, any AD Bruiser. Udyr's going to be AP Bruiser, and then Xayah, Aurelia, AD. And then if you get like Morello or red buff, throw it on Hui or Aurelia. Both of them are really good at carrying those like anti-heal debuffs. But Fast Nining's probably going to be pretty decent. Again, you could use all the comps you see up here to get there. You don't have to permanently play like Ghostly Forecast, for example, or you could like play Syndra for a bit, and then later on you see like Lissandra's, maybe you see a 2-star Azir, you could like sell her, put the mana item on Lissandra, and then put the AP items on your Azir, things like that. There are a lot of creative things you could kind of do in this game, believe it or not. But next comp up we have is going to be the Built Different comp. I mean, Forecast got buffed, so when Forecast get buffed, Built Different's going to be a lot better. We could check the data on this by going to the stats, augments on the website teamfight.lol. If we type in Built Different, averaging a 4.09 right now, like if we compare that to the previous patch, 4.43. So turns out if you give all the Forecast 200 health more, which is pretty much what they did, the comp's going to get a lot better, you know, because look at the comp, it's all Forecast. The augment is kind of dependent on all that, but obviously only play this if you do have the Built Different augment. If you have some sort of econ encounter or portal to get there, it makes it even better because it's hard to fast 8 and then get 2 stars of everything without dying when you take Built Different, because you'd probably want to have like 40 life or something when you play this comp. And then in the mid game, you kind of have to navigate based on what 2 stars you hit. So for example, if we go to the team builder, if you're holding like a 2-star Amumu, you can't use a Lowy. Then you'll also want to hold like Nautilus on your bench until you get Nautilus 2-star. You can't play Ashe yet, so you have to use like Kai'Sa as your item holder. Or maybe you replace Amumu to put in both Ashe and Nautilus later on. That's just one example because he's a Warden and a Porcelain. But what I like to do is I like to pick all the traits. So if we just click a bunch of Forecasts right now and throw them in, like for tank ones, you want to put in stuff like Bruiser, Warden, Behemoth. It's good to have like one of each of them as you're navigating through 1, 2, and 3 costs before you get to the 4 costs. If you have like one of those random tank units, such as like Yasuo, who's a duelist, that's really good too because he's able to be one of your tanks as like one of the non-tank traits, so you could play all of the other ones. And then you want to have some backliners such as a trick shot, sniper, things like that. But it's always going to be based on your items too. You're just trying to get to level 8 as safely as possible, and then you pretty much beat everyone once you get there. Next comp up we have is a Shenna comp. 2-cost reroll for this, go to level 6, econ as hard as possible, roll at level 6, stabilize, and then econ back up, roll down to 50 every single turn until you hit Shen 3, Senna 3, and Aatrox is optional, but he's still pretty useful if you get him for free. And then for augments, you want some sort of reroll augments such as like Team Builder, Trade Sector, things like that. Featherweights is absolutely the best augment for this comp because it literally buffs up the entire team, or everyone that matters at least. And then like Ghostlies are good, Pumping Up's good because it's built on attack speed, but overall solid comp, focus around Shen and Senna. And Shen actually is like super important. This comp is a bit reliant on hitting both of them. It doesn't have the luxury of hitting only one of them. Next comp up we have is Dryad Reroll. This comp, you probably could just rely on Gnar 3 without the Kindred, but it's obviously better to have both. But if you were to compare the need of 3-starring both Shen and Senna versus Gnar and Kindred, Shen and Senna are much more important than like Gnar and Kindred. But Obviously, you still want it if you can't afford to. For Gnar, you just want all the Bruiser items and some sort of healing item. We can see some of their random item recommendations over here. Kindred loves the blue buff. Blue buff is incredible on her because she gets 30 to 20 mana, and then that mana is just going to be going insane, right? Because all the casts are going to be coming out. Going 4 Dryad's really good, but if you ever get a spatula, 6 Dryad is absolutely amazing. I saw a 1-star Ornn with 6 Dryad, and I couldn't even see how many HP bars were on Ornn because there are so many, just because there are 6 Dryad in the game. It's completely busted. Try to add in some Reapers. There are also some Warden builds for this. Some people like to throw in a lot of Wardens when they play Gnar. Lots of things you can do there. Same leveling pattern and econ pattern as Sen and Shenna. Lux Reroll is going to be kind of similar. 2-cost reroll. They did nerf Boiling Point, so you probably still want to have like a Spear of Shojin with Boiling Point. We went over the math a little bit in the patch preview that I do before every single patch on Tuesday, but this comp loves +1. So +1 meaning +1 Arcanist, +1 Porcelain. So if you get a bunch of spatulas, you can make Porcelain spats. 6 Porcelain is one of the most broken traits ever, considering how easy it is to get. At least in my opinion, you either just need 2 spatulas or a spatula and one of the augments. If we take a look here, you just get 3.54. Like, obviously it's biased because you get Lissandra whenever you play this. So it's like, if you're able to hit Lissandra, obviously you're going to do a bit better. But it's completely broken because it gives you 50% reduced damage. Like, come on, that's like a huge amount. I think they actually nerfed it a little bit recently. I think it might have even been higher before, but it's still very, very good. And then Arcanist, getting the 6 or 8 Arcanist, it allows you to drop some of the crappy units. And getting the 8 Arcanist also pretty decent if you have something like a Jeweled Gauntlet. Items for Lux, it's honestly really flexible. I've had all sorts of things work. It really depends on your augments. Sometimes I do like a Morello burn build. Sometimes I do a static Shiv build with Boiling Point. That one's really good. And then sometimes you go like the regular damage build like you see here. It's going to depend on what items you get, but you have to go like all in on one thing. You can't go like half burst damage, half damage over time. So like Jeweled Gauntlet's going to work much better in like a 8 Arcanist build rather than like a 6 Arcanist build with like a Shojin plus Nashers, because this is geared around like casting a lot. So the build really depends on what you're doing. But don't sweat it too much. What I normally do, I just build whatever items are buildable to get as much value from it as possible. And then I use that to kind of save my HP and then allow myself to level up much faster, hit Lissandra more often, and then use the 6 Porcelain plus Arcanist to kind of snowball the game from there. Aphelios Reroll, very solid. I only like playing this when I get +1 Fated. Having 7 Fated versus 5 Fated, I feel like it's the biggest difference in the world. For items on Aphelios, Rageblade, people like that one the most. After that, like any damage items. But honestly, like I've used all sorts of items on Aphelios. I don't notice that much of a difference. Just build any AD attack speed item on him and you're going to be good. In the early game, link up through your Fated buff, your Yasuo, and your Thresh in a lot of cases. If you have items on Kindred, maybe you want to do Ahri plus Thresh once you get to 5 Fated, because the buff goes to everyone and Ahri gives ability power. In the late game, Syndra and Set are going to be the go-tos, so just link up both of them. And then if you have no items on any of your damage Fateds, you could even do like Aphelios plus one of the tank ones to kind of boost yourself up there. Ascension's also really good in this comp. If you have Ascension, you want to link up 2 tank Fated, so you could do like Thresh plus Yasuo or like Thresh plus Set, depending on who you have on your board right now. That way you buy time for Ascension to pop, and then you blow everyone up after that with the augment. So lots of creative things you could do with Fated. You have to think of what you're missing in your team and then link those things up to kind of boost that. But overall, very solid build. 3-cost reroll at level 7. Go for Aphelios 3, Thresh 3. Good to go from there. Trickshot Bruisers, as we talked about with Kai'Sa already, she is nerfed, but she isn't bad. She's just like a little worse than she was in the previous patch, but she was like really good then, so still a very solid option. Going for like 4 Trickshot, 4 Bruiser, or doing like the late game build with Dragon Lords, both are viable. It depends whether you roll on level 8 or level 9. If you're rolling on level 8, the first version you see here with the Bruiser is going to be a bit better. If you're able to roll on 9, the one with more legendaries are going to be a bit better here. Also, one trap that I see a lot of beginners make when playing the second version is they hold on to Janna a lot, but oftentimes you don't really need to play her till the very end, so don't even hold Janna. You'll find her when you need her after you 2-star everyone else, because before this you want to be playing some sort of like random tanks in the front line or playing like the 4 Trickshot, 4 Bruiser comp before that, just because it's a lot more affordable, because getting 2-star everything on the bottom comp very, very difficult. Items for Kai'Sa don't really matter. Just any AD attack speed items will do. I do prefer the attack damage items. I don't think attack speed is that good in these types of builds, but I'm not sweating it too much because I love to slam items to get as much value out of them as possible. And also, if you ever get one of the tattoos that are good for damage, just drop them over on Kai'Sa. We could take a look at those stats right now. So we go to items, and then on all items, go on over to Inkshadow. We have Toxin still in first place, followed by Fury, Bombardment. Protection got nerfed a ton, so it dropped down a lot, and then the worst ones are still Force and Vitality. Vitality is pretty decent on Udyr though, same with Force. So if you get Udyr, like drop it on him. But if you ever get like Toxin, Fury, or Bombardment, just drop it on your Kai'Sa. You will not regret it. Next comp up we have is Heavenly Yone. It still plays around the same thing as it did before, but definitely a lot weaker. And then Titan Resolve nerf definitely hurt him a lot. If we want to compare him to what he was before, he averaged a 4.46. A lot of times I would win games with 2-star Yone just because my augments were good. 3.95 at 3-star, but if we compare it to before, 14.7B, 4.32, and a 3.49, so definitely a lot worse. Is it horrible? No, but definitely missing out on some other stuff. Also, his data on the average placement as a 2-star going to be affected by the Lee Sin and Kayn comp. It's not entirely Yone. So if you're focused on 2-star carry Yone, you might want to give some love over to Kayn and Lee Sin while you're at it when you're playing that comp. Next one up, we have is Janna Zyra Reroll. Very augment dependent. It's pretty much like an augment check. Do you have 2 healthy? Do you have Entered the Dragon? Do you have one of the insane reroll augments such as like 2-for-1? This is pretty much what this comp is asking you when you play it. So do not play this without those augments. I mean, you can, but like don't expect fantastic results. But if I start the game with like 6 Jannas or something like that, like yeah, sure, I'll play it. But you really want to play around one of the OP augments in this comp. You want to do a 2-cost reroll for Janna and Zyra, and then later on, oh, by the way, they did buff Zyra a little bit too, so maybe there's some like Zyra focused builds that you could kind of try. Let me know if it works out for you down in the comments below. Diana main tank, just throw any tank items on her. You prefer the gargoyles, but it's not mandatory by any means, but pretty easy comp to play there. Next one up we have is Inkshadow Kai'Sa. Only play this if you have a +1 Inkshadow because you want to get to 7 Inkshadow, and also in the mid game when you're playing 5 Inkshadow, you don't want to be running like Jax all game, right? You want to be running like some of the better units. So to avoid that issue, like get a +1 Inkshadow at the start of the game when you have like your augments, and then just go for some sort of Kai'Sa build. Throw the tattoos on hopefully her plus like Udyr, maybe one of your other tanks. Drop in an Ornn later on because you get Behemoth for both him and Udyr, and then throw in some trick shots and you're going to be good to go from there. Senna, great item holder, and don't forget you could always like remove a tattoo by benching a unit. It's not like real life. Tattoos are not permanent. Well, I guess in real life you could get them removed as well, but it's much easier to do in TFT. You just bench the unit and then put them back in, and then you can put the tattoo on anyone else. But standard leveling for this because you want to play around the 4 costs. Kai'Sa is still very, very powerful as a champion. Ethereal Blades is going to be next. You want like Rage Blades on Shen, some healing items, maybe some damage items. I'm pretty sure like a triple Rage Blade is like the best thing on him. And then you get healing from one of your augments ideally. But as long as you play a bunch of Behemoths plus like getting 3-star Shen, I've even seen people go 2-star Shen and then fast 9 with it. Really funny stuff because he does stabilize a lot in the early game. So if you get like a crap ton of econ, maybe people are going ghostly so you can't get Shen 3, maybe someone's going the Shen and Senna reroll. You could always just fast 9 with like a 2-star Shen. I've seen it happen before though. I do prefer the 3-star Shen version obviously because if you're picking a whole augment based around one champion, you ideally want to 3-star it, you know? It's just how TFT works if it is balanced. Next comp up we have is Storyweaver Bard. If you have a bunch of Rage Blades, again, great for Bard. Tahm Kench going to be the main tank, and then just fill out the synergies. So Storyweaver's good. You could also get penetration from Kale using green Kale, which is really nice because Bard does both types of damage. Soraka's good for Heavenly Altruist. Also, if you happen to get her 3-star, great. If not, not the end of the world. Sivir for Trickshot. If you get Zoe, you get Zoe, whatever. And then just play like another bruiser such as like Riven. You could even use Galio if you're not playing Soraka because you really are just playing the Riven for Altruist. But very easy comp, just roll on level 7 for Bard 3-star and you're going to be good to go from there. Arcanist Warden, this is going to be one of those 4-cost and 3-cost focus build. It's mainly like a Syndra build, but if you're going for Lux and you can't really hit Lux 3-star, it's a decent comp to pivot into as like a worst case scenario, I think, because you could use a lot of the same items you had before on your Lux. And some games I start off with like a lot of Luxes and then I roll a little bit to test the waters and I don't hit any Luxes. And I'm just like, okay, maybe I don't go for Lux 3 this game. What can I do? Arcanist Warden is one of those comps that you can kind of use to get you to the later parts of the game. Maybe you play around the legendaries later, transfer the items over from like Syndra to Hui later on, throw the leftover AD items on set because this comp doesn't really use swords that well, and then you're going to be decent to go from there. Not the best thing ever, but not the worst thing ever, just like a solid comp. Kobuko Lucky Paws, this is one of my favorite comps. It's really fun to do. It's just rare that I get to play it because I like doing this when I have a 2-star Kobuko before I get the augment, and then I see the augment, I take it, I have 6 Kobukos, and then it's really easy to hit 3-star Kobuko from there. You throw in 6 Bruisers plus whatever damage you can muster in the back line. Preferably trick shots, just because Kai'Sa's really good right now. But I have seen Ashe work a couple of times, but I think people just do it because they didn't hit Kai'Sa. Aurelic also works later on. But if you have any sort of tank items for Kobuko, you don't need like the Bloodthirster Titans build. You could just throw any tank, like Bramble Vest, Dragon Claw, like literally any tank items, any frontline items on Kobuko. Go for it and you will not regret it. It's really fun to do too because you get a lot of gold from Kobuko, but I personally only take it very situationally. Other people are more kind of lax around taking this, which I guess it's fine. It depends on your mood and how much you like the comp. Next one up we have is Lillia Invoker. I'm surprised this comp isn't better. It got buffed a bit and it didn't get hit by the B patch nerfs that much, or at all I should say, but Lillia is just weird because she hits all sorts of random targets. If you haven't noticed yet, if we look at all the 4-cost units, who's good? Kai'Sa, right? Pretty much every patch. And if you look at the single target damage dealers, it's really just Kai'Sa plus Syndra that do that. Everyone else is like AoE. I guess Kayn's not, but he's a melee carry, so it's a bit different. And because of that, they're kind of easier to play around, like Kai'Sa and Syndra. Lillia, Morgana, things like that, Ashe, they all do AoE effects, and just not the best, you know. Their numbers might have to be a bit higher, especially since there are a lot of mega tanks in the meta. Mega tank meaning stuff like Volibear from before. If we go all the way up back to the top, like Dryad Reroll was really OP before. You can't kill that with a Lillia, you know? But maybe the meta changes a little bit like it has been right now. Maybe Lillia can kind of find her way back in, but if she does, you want some sort of AP items on her. I like having like a Gunblade, but it's not really mandatory. Just throw any sort of AP items on her. If you have 6 Invoker, you could get away with no mana item. If you have less than 6 Invoker, maybe you want like 1 mana item, blue buff or Shojin, it doesn't really matter. That's my favorite thing about Lillia. She is not picky with her mana items. Most units are, such as Teemo loves blue buff, Syndra loves blue buff, Lux loves Spear of Shojin, but Lillia could go either or, which makes Lillia a bit better. Hui loves Shojin, so she's a bit more of like the flex AP carry in terms of items there. Next one up we have is Syndra Fated. Linking up Set and Syndra, pretty solid. AP items on Syndra. I only like doing this if I have +1 Fated, and it's kind of like a temporary comp. You want to pivot into probably something else in the later parts of the game if you don't have a +1 Fated. And also maybe in the late game you could throw in more Arcanists to make this work a bit better. It was getting a little more popular in the last patch. Nowadays she did get buffed a bit, so it might be a little bit better. Not like your first go-to comp, but definitely a solid backup if you're going the AP route in the early game. Next one up we have is Kog'Maw Reroll. Let's do some data checking on Kog'Maw. If we go to 1 cost over here and then go to 3-star average placement, we have Kog'Maw in the middle, 4.63, no thanks. In fact, all the 1-cost rerolls looking a little weak except for Kha'Zix for some reason, but no one goes Kha'Zix 3-star. Look at the 3-star rate, 2.64. Not really that juicy there, so it's probably not going to be a 1-cost reroll meta just based on that. But if you happen to start the game with too much candy, you want to be going this comp, that's like the best augment for this. I need to update the image here. And then for your Cho'Gath, you want Ionic Spark plus tank items. I like the healing tank items such as Dragon Claw or Redemption because Cho'Gath gets a lot of health. But overall, very solid comp. After you complete the core, which is Cho'Gath, Malphite, Neeko, Caitlyn, and Kog'Maw, you could do stuff like 5 Mythic, you could do stuff like 7 Mythic, or add in like 4 or 6 Behemoth, either or mix and matching the two is perfectly fine as well. It really just depends on what you hit. I don't really discriminate on that. I just go for the first 5 units and then everything else, just whatever I hit. Next comp up we have is a Mythic Reroll comp. It's just another form of Bard Tahm Kench. but you fill it out with 7 Mythic. It's nice if you have a +1 Mythic. If not, I prefer the other version. After that, we have Zoe Soraka and Diana reroll. Just like a mega 3-cost reroll. No one really goes for Zoe that much, so she is kind of free to hit in a lot of cases. So if that is in one of your games, you're hitting a bunch of Zoes naturally, this is one of the comps you could kind of go. AP plus mana regen items on her are going to be great. Diana main tank, Soraka secondary carry, and then just throw in a bunch of Dragon Lords. It's pretty much the same as a Janna comp, except your carry is different. 4-cost Ghostly, very solid mid-game comp. You could go like 4 or 6 Ghostly depending on what units you're hitting. Kai'Sa, Kayn, Morgana, all very solid. Late game is going to be the Udyr, biggest power spike in the world for this comp. One of my favorites still, but Kai'Sa a bit contested, and there are better builds for Kai'Sa, but you could use this to kind of go into the other builds, but overall very solid. Umbral, Yone, and Alune. There are better versions of Yone, probably Heavenly, but as we saw before, like, Yone is just not what he once was, and Alune kind of never was a thing. If we look at the 3-star average placement for Alune, 4.2, and keep in mind, 3-star 3 costs are pretty hard to hit, so you really want to be below 4.0. Preferably even like a 3.8 in a lot of cases to go for them that often. Really not that great of a comp. Alune Invoker reroll, kind of similar, but if you hit a lot of Alunes, like what can you do? You have to go for one of these builds. We don't get to decide everything in TFT. Sometimes we have to use what Mortdog gives us. You know, if Mortdog gives you Alunes, make Illuminate, you know? Duelist reroll, we saw before already, much weaker. Turns out ability power very good on Volibear, and Titan's Resolve kind of destroyed that, but they're probably going to let this comp rest for this patch and then buff it up again in the next patch. That's my guess there, but if you get a lot of Volibears and Tristanas, no one should be going for these units ever. So I guess if you can hit it for free, it might still be solid, especially if you have something like Locket of the Iron Solari from like Fine Vintage or from one of the random support encounters. Like, that's probably going to be my signal to go for one of these comps if I get a bunch of Lockets. Yeah, that's going to be pretty much it for this week. We're going to be updating this throughout the week as well, and of course we'll have another major update with the video on next Friday. Every single Friday we've been updating this for like 3 or 4 years now. Longest standing player run tier lists in TFT. But just to summarize, like, Kayn Lee Sin, probably going to be the best comp. Not too hard to predict there because everything else got nerfed and this was good in the previous patch. But Fast 9ing 5 cost, probably going to be pretty solid. I wonder what the sneak reroll comp's going to be. If we look at the data, like, Gnar and Kindred are still pretty solid. For some reason, Soraka's up here, but I don't think that's because it's a reroll comp. It's just because she's used in Heavenly a bunch. Aphelios pretty solid, as we talked about before if we do like a quick data check, but nothing like too crazy. If we sort by here, scroll down a bit, let's see like the first 3 costs that pop up. It's going to be Thresh, Aphelios, Alawi, Yone. First 2 costs are going to be Kindred and Gnar, of course, followed by Shen and like Senna. It's not too far after that. Janna, same thing. But if anything changes, it will be on the website, bunnymuffins.lol/meta. Bookmark the site, share it with your friends, do whatever you need to do. But I hope you all enjoyed this video. Of course, again, remember there was a B patch. This includes all those changes. But let me know what comps you are looking forward to trying in this next patch. And that's going to be it for me today. I hope to see you all next time.